Hello, my name is Laura Graham, and I will be going over capital budgeting, what it is, and how a project's risk can be incorporated into a capital budgeting analysis. As a part of risk analysis, I will introduce and define sensitivity analysis, explaining the qualitative and quantitative steps necessary in conducting a sensitivity analysis. Finally, I'll discuss the details of a tornado graph. Let's begin. Capital budgeting is a process that entails assessing and choosing long-term investment projects that correspond with an organization's strategic objectives. All investments have a certain degree of risk. Capital budgeting entails a comprehensive evaluation of the risk linked to each project. By identifying and evaluating these risks, organizations may make informed decisions and apply risk mitigation techniques, thereby decreasing the likelihood of financial losses. To sum it up, capital budgeting helps companies decide where to allocate their funds for projects that will benefit them in the long run. As a reminder, every investment carries some level of risk. One tool used to lessen the probability of these risks is a sensitivity analysis. Conducting sensitivity analysis helps companies understand how changes in variables affect the outcome. It helps identify the most critical variables, and it helps assess a project's overall risk. What is a sensitivity analysis? A sensitivity analysis measures how susceptible the output of a model is to alterations in the value of the inputs. It aids in identifying which input variables drive most of the variation in the output. We can talk about a sensitivity analysis in terms of adjusting ingredients in a cookie. Imagine you're baking cookies and your desired outcome is a particular texture, maybe hard, maybe soft, maybe chewy. Your input or your variables are things like ingredients, which could be butter, eggs, sugar, flour, salt. How about the way you measure? The size you make the cookies, the temperature they're baked at, even the way you scoop the dough, or the way that you cool and store the cookies. Similarly, in capital budgeting, we manipulate key variables to observe their impact on financial outcomes. The first step in conducting a sensitivity analysis is to identify the key variables that could affect the outcome of the project. Like for the cookies, the ingredients, or the temperature. These variables could be internal or external to the project. Once you have identified the key variables, you need to define the range of values for each variable that could impact the project outcome. The next step is then to determine the relationship between the variables. Determine if they're positively or negatively correlated. In terms of profitability, for example, in a financial model, measuring a company's profitability, key inputs typically encompass sales growth, cost of goods sold, operating expenses, interest rates, inflation, and tax rates. By increasing and decreasing each of these inputs and observing the impact on profits, you can determine which inputs are most sensitive, where minor changes instigate major swings in profits. Once you have defined the key variables, their ranges of values, and their relationships, you can begin the quantitative analysis. This involves running the model or project through various scenarios to see how the changes in the variables impact the outcome. After running the analysis, you need to evaluate the results to determine the impact of the changes in the variables on the project outcome. Based on the results of the sensitivity analysis, you need to develop a mitigation plan to address potential risk or capitalize on opportunities. Capital budgeting involves assessing the viability of a long-term investment by analyzing its financial cash flows. Subsequently, we apply a discount rate to these cash flows to determine their present value, allowing us to make a decision based on metrics such as the net present value or the NPV. If the NPV of the project exceeds zero, we deem it a favorable investment. Similarly, if the internal rate of return, or IRR, surpasses the discount rate, we again classify it as a sound decision and vice versa. In this context of profitability, we quantitatively assess our findings through sensitivity analysis, focusing on outputs such as the NPV and the IRR. As an assessment and evaluation tool, we can use a tornado diagram. The tornado diagram offers a clear method for identifying the factors whose uncertainty has the greatest impact, allowing you to concentrate on what truly matters. This allows us to save time, minimize frustration, and enhance our efficiency. This diagram indicates that uncertainty in market share and technology penetration significantly influences value. Given these factors, we must examine our evidence closely, conduct further research in these areas, and concentrate our creative efforts on maximizing the potential benefits. In an attempt to mitigate potential risk, as market share is more significant than price in this scenario, we might consider providing discounts to increase volume. Perhaps we could reach an agreement on standard with a competitor that would enhance overall technology and penetration. All in all, reading a tornado diagram is simple. Big bars need more attention and small bars don't. Let's recap. Capital budgeting helps companies decide where to allocate their funds for projects that will benefit them in the long run. Remember, every investment carries some level of risk, and one tool used to lessen this risk is a sensitivity analysis. This technique examines how changes in key input variables like sales volume or cost impact the project's MVP, providing insight into the potential range of outcomes based on different assumptions. Overall, sensitivity analysis measure how the variability in inputs impact the outputs of a model, and they identify which inputs drive most of the variation in the output. Please take the time to review the references listed here, and thank you so much for learning all about sensitivity analysis with me.